Grace Morizawa, and I'm on the Day of Remembrance Consortium, on the committee that planned this event.
And what's the importance of this event for you?
Well, this is the 75th anniversary of the signing of Executive Order 9066, which ultimately sent 120,000 Japanese and people of Japanese descent to American concentration camps. And because of that, we as a Japanese community want to speak out against the xenophobia, Islamophobia, racism that's being, put into executive orders and impacting many, many people.
So you're fearful that Trump and what's going on today brings back what could happen in the past?
Yes, I'm absolutely fearful because only a few people spoke up then, but it seems like despite the protests, despite evidence to the contrary of national security not being in danger, they're marching forth with their agenda.
So they need an enemy, a scapegoat.
Yeah, probably. But, xenophobia, Islamophobia has been really embedded in our culture now, and it's really time to stop.
So this 75th anniversary is really critical.
I think so. I think Japanese as a community, we share deep empathy with what's happening. We have a historical memory of suffering and pain, and it's just not right for this to be happening right now and again. And our Issei people, this is a kind of a nightmare, not our Isseis, they've all passed away, but our Niseis, when they start talking about this, it brings back a very nightmarish existence that they've suffered through.
My name is Hiroshi Shimizu. I am the chairman of the planning committee for the Day of Remembrance program.
And what does this day mean to you, the 75th anniversary?
It's extremely important because it's 75 years since President Roosevelt signed the executive order that led to our incarceration in concentration camps. Myself, I was in there for one of the longest periods because I was born in camp and I was 4.5, almost 5 when I got out. So the entire first 4.5 years of my life was spent incarcerated, and so personally for me it's very significant, and it's significant because the threat of this kind of thing happening again is looming very much over our heads now.
So you're concerned about something similar happening today?
Oh, very much so. It doesn't take much for the momentum to get started, and if it does, it's almost impossible then to stop. But the talk about a Muslim registry, Muslim ban, although that's been stopped in the courts. Our president is talking about rewriting that executive order to make it, quote, constitutionally acceptable. Basically, that's what Executive Order 9066 was, constitutionally acceptable, and the Supreme Court ratified that.
I'm Yayako Naritomi, and I work for Ninjas. What's going on with the immigration with the Muslims now, and I'm so afraid that it's going to be a repeat of what my family went through. And although I wasn't born yet, I felt the impact with my own mom and dad and my brothers. So I don't ever want it to repeat.
What was the impact for your family?
Well, the shame of being Japanese, and like for Boys' Day to hang up the koi, we couldn't do anything like that. And it's anything Japanese, we couldn't show that we were Japanese at that time. Parents were Kibe Nisei, meaning born in America, raised in Japan, and came back. So for them, it was really tough. So all I remember growing up is they hung off the American flag whenever they could. But when I had my sons, I wanted to hang koi. My mom said, "You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that." And I didn't understand until.
So did your parents talk about the...
No, they never talked about it. Never talked about
You
it.
were traumatized.
I guess so, yeah. And it was my brothers that went to not my parents. Just my brothers went to go see where they were born.
My name's Keiko Kuba. I was invited to represent the American Friends Service Committee, which is a Quaker do-gooder organization. And I volunteered with them for many years. One of the things for me that I've always felt like was important that mostly the Nisei have done over the years is every time someone in Washington tries to drag out the idea of camps, they haul themselves to Washington to be interviewed and to testify about how inappropriate that response is. I mean, they did it in the 50s for the Chinese and the 60s for the blacks. After 9/11, they went out for the Muslims, and they're getting pretty old. So I think the rest of us have to step up. We have to get our kids to step up and, hold this memory and retain it. And so I think when you think it's the 75th year, that people that actually were alive then are getting quite old, and the rest of us really need to be prepared to be responsible, because obviously we're in dangerous times now where one of the Trump supporters thought it was fine to say, let's open camps for the Muslims like they did for the Japanese. I don't know, did you see that interview where the reporter asked him like 3 times, are you really saying? And he was clueless.
Are you shocked and surprised that people would say it's okay to jail people because of their nationality or their race or their
Well, I'm
religion?
not. I mean, I think it's shocking, but I can't say I'm shocked. I think people are pretty ignorant and really a lot of it is that they haven't been exposed to people that are different from them, and so they're scared, or they're looking for reasons why things aren't working out for them. And the easiest answer is people that they don't know, right? Rather than people that they're more comfortable with, or in some ways our leaders who are not being very responsible a lot of the times, right?
Now, the growing dangers of war, too, militarization, danger of war in the Pacific. Are you concerned about the United States moving towards a kind of another war with people in Asia or people
Well, I
around
think,
the world?
there's no such thing as wars that are ultimately that are local. I mean, that's one of the delusional things that our government's trying to have been trying to kind of play out for many, many years. But you have I think people are finally maybe taking it a little bit serious that we have all these bombs and that Donald Trump could make a decision to drop them and start a Holocaust. And so, yeah, obviously. I mean, I think one of the things that the organization that I work with has done is work with the Hibakusha, the atom bomb survivors. And they are another voice that they're getting really old too, right? And but I think that people don't realize that their children have some health issues, that it's not stuff that goes away. And the same is true for Agent Orange survivors from Vietnam, that their children are having issues and grandchildren are having issues. So I think that some of it is in the U.S., we're shocked when anything that relates to war comes a little bit close to us, but we really don't have much of an idea of the impact of some of the things that we've done in the world and how, it's really affecting people for generations.
And Fukushima, are you concerned about that?
Well, yeah, don't you think? I mean, the Japanese government, they used to have like a 0 tolerance level for a certain kind of radiation exposure, and instead of dealing with it after Fukushima, they raised it to 20 for children. And you just think to yourself, okay, what's that about? And then at the same time, that factory was built by General Electric. So we're really responsible for that in a lot of ways, and there are any number of factories that were built with the same design by General Electric. And so it's not, it's easy for us to think that's somebody else's problem, but in a lot of ways, Americans are responsible for that. It's not too much fun being an American in that sense, because you see what we've done and the impacts of, the fact that we are out of sync with our values and our technical ability to do things. That I know when I was growing up, a friend of mine was a general in Washington, and that I understood that every officer who's a full bird colonel and above gets 2 tickets to a bomb shelter. I think it's somewhere in Virginia. And you just think the people that are making this decision seem to think that it's worth coming up from, worth surviving an atomic bomb blast. And then the next question that always comes to my mind is, who are they taking? Do you take one child? Do you take your wife? Do you take your mistress? I mean, it's just insane to me that they're so silly that they actually think that they want to survive this.
But it seems the politicians continue to vote for money to modernize tactical nuclear weapons like Obama, tactical bombs, and this kind of thing.
Don't you think
idea.
it's all about the money? It's about the industry. It's just like, healthcare being run by the pharmaceutical companies and, and the insurance companies. That those are the reasons why we, in this country, why those decisions are made. It's really about supporting industry. They're the ones that have affirmative action, right?
Art Shibayama was just 13 years old and living comfortably in Peru when he was forced out of the only home he had ever known. During World War II, the United States government, in collaboration with several Latin American countries, orchestrated the forced removal and internment of over 2,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, which included both citizens of 13 Latin American countries as well as Japanese immigrants. Like young Art Shibayama, the vast majority were Japanese Peruvians. Shortly after the Japanese military attack on Pearl Harbor, community leaders were scapegoated and rounded up for detention throughout the Americas. In Peru, a blacklist had been generated. While not based on any real or credible evidence of Japanese subversive activity, the blacklist targeted businessmen, community leaders, and educators. In collaboration with Peruvian officials, the U.S. used the blacklist as the basis for rounding up hostages. These hostages were then to be traded for Americans held by Japan.
The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors, surviving Japanese Americans, of the 120,000 who were relocated or detained. Yet no payment can make up for those lost years. So what is most important in this bill has less to do with property than with honor. For here we admit a wrong. Here we reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law.
However, Art was denied justice. Under this law, Japanese Latin Americans were deemed ineligible for redress as they were not U.S. citizens or residents at the time of internment. In an effort to call attention to their hidden history and to support efforts for redress, the Campaign for Justice was formed.
The Campaign for Justice started in 1996, and it was founded by individuals and organizations who wanted to seek redress for Japanese Latin Americans. It was founded during the time of the Mochizuki lawsuit when that was filed, which sought to get redress for Japanese Latin Americans who were denied under the Civil Liberties Act.
In response to public pressure, the Department of Justice offered a settlement of only $5,000 each, just 1/4 of the $20,000 redress provided to the Japanese Americans.
I wanted to get the equal justice. I wanted to regain the dignity for my parents.
While supporting the decision of those who accepted the settlement, Art Shibayama, along with several others, chose to opt out of the settlement. He then filed his own lawsuit, preferring to fight for both redress and a full disclosure of the violations committed by the United States during World War II. Despite his efforts, Art was once again denied justice. His case was dismissed in the final months of 2002.
It's not like we wanted to come here. We didn't want to come here. We were forced to come here. We were brought here by the government. So how can that be illegal? That don't make sense.